Now that we have the Antelope's repository created, we need to create the Antelope collection transfer and any other transfers that we need for the Antelopes. Transfers or DTOs are shared among all layers, Yves, Z, Glue API. So we need to place those transfers and the definition of those transfers inside the folder shared. You can see it here. Here we create a folder for our module, in this case Antelope. We could have some other things inside this folder, and in this lesson we're gonna just create the transfer. So we create a folder with the name transfer. And DTOs are defined in Spryker with XML. So we have to create a folder here, a file, name of the entity, and then the naming convention requires to add transfer to the name and then XML. You can take a look at some of the folders that we already have here, like the checkout REST API, for example, and you can see here the transfer definition. So we can take this heading here for the transfers definition, because we can have more than one DTO inside the file. So let's create the transfer definition and let's add the main tag, transfers. You can see there is in plural. It means we can have more than one DTO inside the same file. And after that, you can see we use the transfer tag. We give it a name, and that's going to be the name of the class plus transfer that is going to be generated. Inside, we add properties that sometimes map exactly the same property that we have in the entity. So let's use the transfer tag, and the name is going to be Antelope. First, we're going to create the Antelope. And here we're going to map the properties that we're going to return from the database, from the table, into this XML. So we use the tag property, and inside we give it a name. As a naming convention, the names respect the names of the column. Here you can see that we have name, color, age, gender. So we're going to map all of the columns that we're going to return from the table as an Antelope's entity and mapped into the DTO with the same name. So here we add inside the attribute name, and we press tab and then type. Here we can indicate if the type is, for example, a string. It could be an integer, it could be a float, so single types, scalar types, or we can have, for example, other DTOs inside a DTO. We can also have a collection of DTOs inside a property. So here we indicate the type string, and we do the same thing for the rest of the types. So if we have color, then we add also color as a string, and after that we can add ID Antelope of type integer. So try to define by yourself by pausing the video the rest of the fields by using string, int, float inside this transfer. Okay, I hope you made it. One thing to take into consideration is if we have an underscore in the column's name, then we substitute the underscore and then we camel case the name. So instead of type underscore ID, we use it like PHP variables. So we use type ID. Let's do the same thing for the rest of the values. So as you can see, we have mapped the Antelope's table columns into properties here, and these properties then are going to be part of the class of this Antelope transfer class that is going to be created where we're going to execute generate transfer. So this is the basic transfer that we're going to have, the Antelope, but we indicated here that we're going to return an Antelope collection. So how can we define an Antelope collection? Well, we do the same thing. We add a tag transfer. We name it Antelope collection, and then we add properties. In this case, we can indicate that we return antelopes in plural, and the type is going to be Antelope, this type that we created here. What else can we indicate in a collection? Well, in a collection, we can indicate also the pagination, because if we have thousands of records, we're not going to return them all at once. So we can paginate the records. So we can indicate also a property here called pagination as a naming convention for pagination. And the type is going to be pagination, that we don't have it yet. So let's create it. And let's add a transfer with the name pagination. And then let's add the properties that we find in a pagination. For example, in a pagination, we have limit, that is a number. So we're going to identify it as integer. In this case, the short name is int. Then we have offset. We also have the current page that we are paginating, and page is also integer. And then we have some other properties, also numeric properties like max per page, number of results, or it could be count. For example, if we want to return the counting of the total of the records, we can have we can indicate also the last index, the first page, last page, next page, previous page. So those are the normal properties that you find in a pagination system. So let's add also these properties. So as you can see here, we have this object pagination that is going to be created as pagination transfer, and it's up to us to populate this object once we're going to paginate the results. We have limit, offset, page, max per page, number of results, first index, first page, last page, next page, and previous page. Then we have the Antelope collection. The Antelope collection object is gonna have antelopes of type Antelope, and the type Antelope is here. This is the basic DTO for our entity, and then the pagination inside. Let's now run transfer generate command so that we can see the classes that are going to be generated for us. We're here in the console, so we can run console transfer generate, and the classes that were generated are placed inside the generated folder, as we saw here in the repository. And you can see now that if we take a look inside the generated folder, then shared transfer, we should have here the Antelope transfer. You can see here the class Antelope transfer, and we're going to have all of the properties defined here as constants, public constants. Then we're going to have setters and getters for all of the properties that were created. So if we take a look here by clicking on the structure of the class, you can see here that we have also the properties as properties of the class, age, color, etc. And then we're going to get a getter for every property. We're going to also have a get name of the property or fail in case we want to raise an exception, for example here, if the property is not populated. And we're going to have also all of the methods to set those properties here for us. So it's a simple object or class in order to instantiate objects of this type. So the same thing goes for Antelope collection here. You can see that we have two properties, antelopes, and then we have pagination. And you can see here that we have the type hinting with var generated shared transfer Antelope transfer. So this is the type. In reality, it could have been already added with the type here, like this, for example, Antelope. But in the generation that we have now, in this version of the DTO, we don't have the properties type added to the class. Okay, now let's take a look at the interface just to see that the type is being loaded correctly. So now if we remove, for example, the use, and here we don't need the annotation because the type is already added here in the return type, we can see that we have auto completion, and you can see that it's located inside generated shared transfer Antelope collection transfer. And the same goes for the Antelope collection transfer.